Hello again and welcome back to Sustainability Live Singapore. It's time for our next fireside, driving sustainability and impact. That's with Luanne Sieh, Group Chief Sustainability Officer at CIMB. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Neil. How is everything?
It's all going very well so far. I always know it's a good event when I have learned something, because we do an awful lot of work in the sustainability field. You often talk about a lot of the same issues, but we've pushed the agenda in so many different directions today. It's been absolutely fascinating. And I'm sure we're about to do the same again now. No pressure at all. So we've got an awful lot to get through. But where I'll start is a question I always love to ask anyone who works in the field of sustainability. And that is, for you personally, as an individual, what was it that first motivated you to want to work in this particular sector?
Well, I had always thought about working in civil society, doing something good for humanity, when you're young and idealistic. But I decided to first start off my career in the corporate sector. And you know what? I was in strategy in financial services for the longest time. And my job was starting up new units that nobody else was looking at. So things like customer experience at that time, fintech at that time, and sustainability was one of those things that I started up. And for once, I decided that I would stay in this area because it was a new and coming area, but I thought it was immensely impactful as well. The truth is, I stumbled into it, but at the right time.
It's amazing how many people in business do stumble into particular areas and then find something they are genuinely passionate about. That's a vibe I'm already getting from you. Let's move on to the actual work that CIMB are doing in terms of sustainability. Let's lay out the context. What do you do? How do you do it? And what might be, most importantly, different potentially to other people?
What I do, I think I only have half an hour, so I don't think I'll be able to talk about all of it. Essentially, what I do is to transform CIMB, which is a bank, into a responsible company. And what that means as a provider of financial services, we are in the middle of almost everything in individual people's lives, in companies, financial plans, etc. To do anything, you need money. And where we come in terms of responsible banking, is that we can help to channel money into the areas that need money, for example, in sustainable development, in climate finance, in biodiversity, and financial inclusion, for example. But also at the same time, we can help to shape our clients' behaviors. So, for example, if banks said that, hey, I'm not going to be giving money or lending money to any company that does deforestation or has human rights issues, then I don't think there'll be many companies that will be doing deforestation. So we have a huge influence on what our clients and what the broader economy does. So what I do on a day-to-day basis is a couple of things. One, I look at the overall sustainability strategy for the company, but of course that includes our internal footprint. Looking at our own emissions, we have a target to become carbon neutral by 2030 in our own emissions. But for bank, really, it is the scope 3 finance emissions, i.e. what we do with our clients, that makes the most difference. So there we put in place policies to limit harm. Also, we look at all the transactions that we're financing, and we try to ensure that money isn't going to projects that do bad things or companies that do bad things, but also at the same time we put out products and services to help to encourage clients to do things. So for example, we put out a sustainability linked loan for SMEs that can help SMEs to measure carbon footprint, and if they manage to reduce their emissions in line with SBTI targets, then we give them a rebate on their financing. So that's how we try and encourage our customers. So lots of things like that, as well as things like regulatory engagement, raising awareness, which is why I'm at this talk today.
Now, one thing that particularly interests me there is when we're talking about impact, you know, the biggest bang for your sustainability buck, if you like. How do you go about assessing that impact? Because I'm sure there's a whole myriad of options that you could take, different strategies you can follow, partners you can work with. How do you go about selecting the projects and the strategies that will give that biggest impact?
So I started up the sustainability function at CIMB. This was in late 2018, and our headquarters is in Malaysia, although we do have operations in Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, and Cambodia as well. But anywhere in ASEAN outside of Singapore, back in 2018, sustainability was a very, very new area. And in fact, when I started this, people were looking at me like, why is a bank looking at this? Are you a tree hugger? Yeah, and that is the question that I got all the time. And so when we first started, there was very little guidance out there. And what we did was we used the rating agencies and the indices as a kind of foundational guide to look at what all the various things a good responsible bank would be doing. So things like policies, things like raising awareness, things like board oversight, for example. So that was really the first phase of our strategy. Now, from setting the foundations, we then very quickly moved on towards impact and driving impactful projects. And some of the things that we did, for example, was we were the very first emerging market bank to announce our exit from coal by 2040. That's in line with the Paris Agreement. We're also we were the first ASEAN bank to join the Net Zero King Alliance. So many things like this, where we do get guidance from global bodies such as the UNEP-FI. UNEP-FI is the UN Environment Program Finance Initiative's Principles for Responsible Banking, where we were a founding member, and through societies like the NZBA, the Net Zero Banking Alliance. So those bodies really give guidance on what good looks like. And moving forward, so climate is one area that we've worked a lot on, and we've had many firsts there. But looking broader than climate, we also look at other issues where we can play a difference. Things like financial inclusion. We have recently set a target for financial inclusion. Not just financial inclusion, but also financial health. How do you help people to access financial services, but also to save up enough money to be able to do basic life things like buy a house, have a family, raise kids, retire, for example. We also look at things like human rights, biodiversity. So these are newer areas that we are now starting to work on.
If I could take you back to, I believe you said it was 2018 when you first tried to get this up and running and had to go through all of the tree hugging accusations, which I can see greatly affected you, and you've definitely come through that. So well done. How would you advise people who are trying to get sustainability projects up and running at different size companies? In those early steps, what advice would you have about how to actually get it off the ground and actually become part of an organisation?
Wow. So many things. I would say that the first thing is to realize that making changes scale and systemically in an organization, economy, or any kind of ecosystem is not easy, right? You're changing things 180 degrees. So that will take a lot of mindset change, a lot of buy-in. But the other complication is that this is still a very new and developing field. It was new and developing back in 2018, and it is still developing now, with many new things coming on stream, new requirements, new regulations, disclosure requirements like the IFRS S1 and S2. So what any person driving sustainability needs to realize is that things are and will be ambiguous, and things will change. So how do you manage in a situation like that? Well, the first thing is you need to just get your hand onto every bit of reading material you can get. I get a lot of my news and updates through LinkedIn, where I follow key thinkers. So if anyone's from financial services, look at David Harlan. He is the head of, I think, climate risk at UNFFI. So things like that. So get yourself really up to speed on what's going on, and you will need to continue doing that. The second thing is to find champions and allies at the very senior level. This is not something that, one person on the ground can implement and change overnight. It really needs senior buy-in. And sometimes, it may not be from the person that you expected. Sometimes it's finding that champion and kind of working with them to carve out something. So when we first started, there was this one person who was very vocal against sustainability. But the more we spoke, the more we bounced our ideas off her, the more we socialized our upcoming policies with her, the more of a champion she became. And she turned around 100% and became, actually took on an official position with us, leading sustainability transformation. So finding these hidden champions and allies at the senior management level in every business unit and every country, that was really important for us. Of course, there are hard organizational levers as well. Things like ensuring oversight at the board. So we have a sustainability program where all the project milestones as well as the achievements get highlighted at the board and at the CEO level very regularly. We have sustainability related KPIs for top management and actually down all the way through the organization. So there are ways that we help to encourage everyone in the organization to make the changes that are needed, because they're not easy. So there needs to be some sort of carrot and I guess some sort of stick as well if things are not moving.
Now, for anyone who's been with us since the beginning of the show today, which I obviously hope you have, there'll be a key theme that keeps on recurring, and that is the rather old-fashioned notion that sustainability and sort of bottom line or business success can sometimes push against each other. One can take away from the other. How have you gone about separating those two issues and those two suggestions? How do you go about doing that?
So in many cases, the objectives of sustainability and, for example, business profitability are aligned. And in the short term, for example, if you put in place energy reduction or energy efficiency grids, then that will reduce energy costs in the short term, but also medium to long term, especially if it's like, for example, a CapEx upgrade, machinery upgrade. Now, having said that, those are projects where you can see immediate returns. There will be many projects where the returns are in the medium to long term, but think about it as an investment, because it is an investment. So for example, even if I had to sink in a lot of money for a CapEx upgrade, but that means that I would be able to be resilient to changes in the next 5, 10, 15 years, then that would be protecting profitability. People make investments, companies make investments all the time. Yeah, and sustainability is no different. although the returns may only manifest in the longer term, but it is also very much on a risk perspective, right? I mean, and this is the constant dilemma with how you measure success of risk functions, because the best case is that nothing moves up. How do you measure that, right? So that's always a debate. Now, on the other hand, there are so many opportunities that are opening up with sustainability, with the preferences of individuals, with the regulations coming up. There are huge opportunities for business, new businesses or transitioning businesses that have opened up. So it's important to not look at just what your business looks like today, but to imagine what the world will be like in 2030. Because by 2030, if we are still on track for the Paris Agreement, which we should all be striving for, because if not, then the world will be in a very bad place. But if we follow that, we need to reduce carbon emissions by half by 2030, and that's only 2 years away. So the world by 2030 will be very, very, very different from what it is today. So when you're thinking about investments, making these investments and planning, think about the longer term, because things will change very rapidly. If you think things are moving fast on sustainability now, by, I'd say, 2028 to 2030, things would have accelerated even more.
Absolutely. And another key theme that has appeared on several times today is talking about compliance. Yes, obviously everyone needs to hit their compliance targets. But a question I put to you, as I put to several of our guests today, is being compliant enough anymore? For a genuinely ambitious sustainability function within an organisation, is just being a compliant, tick that box, is that enough?
Compliance to regulations alone was enough, you wouldn't need a sustainability function. You would need a legal and compliance function, because if you went below that or that base, then you'd be doing illegal things. So sustainability is always looking at going above and beyond the regulations. Now, the regulations, however, are also rapidly ramping up across the world, across all industries. Things like carbon tax, things like EU deforestation regulations, etc. So that is coming thick and fast. Now, why shouldn't companies just stick with regulations, especially when regulations are starting to take into account all these factors? Well, the thing is, if you manage just to meet that regulation, what's going to happen is that, number one, because the regulations get rolled out in such a rapid pace, it takes time to understand. It takes time to really implement these things properly. So you don't want to be caught on your back foot, because when that happens, you're managing just to meet the expectations and the regulations, and you will not be able to reap the most beneficial synergies and to really approach the matter in a really strategic way. So if you start ahead of the regulations, or seeing what regulations are coming out, so very simple things like keeping on top of regulatory consultations, you'd be able to foresee maybe to a 90% or 80% accuracy what's going to come up. But start preparing for it early, because that's the way you really get the true synergies, and not just ticking off a checklist, because that's going to be costs. And it's going to be hard to get the benefits as well from that, because there's just not enough time.
That's a very good way of looking at making sure you are at the cutting edge. And my final question really is, one thing I've also been exploring today are regional challenges, because we often think very, very globally. The sustainability challenges in, say, North America will different to Africa, to Europe, to APAC and so forth. How crucial is it for you that sustainability operations acknowledge the particular challenges in their own regions and address them accordingly, rather than just taking a global view?
Oh, for us, as an ASEAN financial service provider, that is very, very, very central to what we do. Now, for those who, work in global organizations or, from the West or developed countries, it's very different because, your surroundings and what needs to be done is very clear. And that's because the social and economic aspects of the whole ESG equation are already, not entirely, of course, but very much in place, right? So in a country or a region where many people are still, living at or below the poverty line, where there are lots of rural poor, then the equation or the whole just transition conversation becomes very real. So, for example, if you're gonna say you're gonna limit emissions from power, we have to ensure that there is enough energy from renewable sources to make up for the difference, right? So you can't immediately go around shutting coal plants when there isn't enough power for business as usual. So that needs to be done in a very measured way. In another example, and by the way, we have recently set net zero aligned targets for our palm oil portfolio, and that portfolio supports about 3 million rural smallholder farmers within Malaysia and Indonesia. So how do you do the transition, but with their livelihoods and well-being in mind, keeping in mind that there's 3 million of them, and that's a huge proportion of the GDP as well, 3 to 5% of Malaysia and Indonesia. So all these considerations are really, really important, because you might just be doing more harm than good if we don't take into account these other social and economic considerations. Now, one of the issues, though, I must put it on the flip side. Many companies and people are using the just transition as a reason or excuse to move very, very slowly in very tiny steps. Now, that, although it makes life easier and puts off the difficult decisions, will not result in a positive outcome for everyone. It doesn't matter that you're in a developing country, because climate change knows no boundaries. So please do take just transition considerations into account, but do not use that as a delay tactic, because you're not doing anyone any favors.
Absolutely. Just a little bit of feedback from our virtual audience today, from Willow. Just an observation, this presentation's been amazing. Putting the topic of financed emissions out there is so critical. So I think we'll class that as a glowing review. Thank you so much for your time today and joining us here at Sustainability Live Singapore. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you very much indeed.